Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me again today is our co-host, Assistant Chief of Operations, John Feddema. Hi, John.
I think you can stop introducing me by now because so far it's still the same.
Yeah, and you know what? Our viewership has gone down according to our producer, Jonah Van Tile, which is obviously it's because of the people on the camera. It's definitely not the producer, but we do have the longer podcast that should come out in December.
I would think it's more of a reflection on me. I would gladly allow you to bring in somebody of better talent.
Well, it's not better talent, but I think we were talking before we started about some different perspectives on some things and some ideas. So some of you out there who may or may not be watching, you may have been volunteered for something that you're not aware of yet, but you will be. And you can thank Chief Feddema for that. So, John, you may be asking why there is a fire helmet on the table, or you may not be.
No.
But we had a turkey last time, and I thought it added something to the background. So it was my great-grandfather's helmet. I thought it would look cool on the table for this week, so
It does.
Brought it. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It's kind of cool, and it breaks up the color. So this is our Cliff Notes of the review. For those not aware, the review is the publication we put out every Friday to personnel inside CAFMA. It also goes to folks outside. For those who have not subscribed, you can subscribe to it. For those who are subscribed that don't want to be, you can unsubscribe. And for those who work here, you don't have a choice. You just get it. There's no unsubscribe for you. But a couple of weeks ago, John, we talked about communication. And one of the over this Thanksgiving weekend that just happened or just passed, I was talking to some peers for a virtual cocktail, and we were discussing some things in the fire service, something we don't often think about, and it had to do with, hey, what do you do on a fire scene when you have a belligerent patient and they're saying some things? And so that got me thinking about the topic and have we done enough? And then I thought, the saying that silence is golden. So I looked it up, and the saying is actually speech is silver and silence is golden, which just triggered in my mind, well, what about the listening component that we didn't discuss last time? So this week's review, the Chief's Desk portion of it, could actually be two separate reviews. It's not that long. You can still read it. It's the same length. I was actually succinct. However, so the Chief's Desk takes on two components. The first one is just active listening, the art of listening to people. I know you're really good at that because you don't like words.
I think I'm doing just fine. You just keep on going. Yeah. I'm all right.
So we talk a little bit about listening and what it takes to listen to someone and really listen to the message. Because anytime you listen to someone else speaking, you're listening through your own filters. And a lot of times we listen to respond rather than listen to understand.
Yep. No, oftentimes, like I say, it's listening to respond back to you. Some people are harder to listen to than others. But, really, if we're truly listening to what's being said and trying to understand what's being said, it's listening to get a better grasp of what you're saying, relate to what you're saying. And then I think you put it in the review. It's asking those clarifying questions to kind of figure out what you were trying to get across. And that's why email, and you put it in there, email is so bad because you don't get to ask those questions. You don't get to ask those clarifications that you do in a conversation.
Right. Well, and sometimes we hear one thing and the person's trying to get across a different message than what we're hearing. And that's where the feedback loop is so important, because at that point I need to ask you for clarification, because I may perceive you saying one thing. And if I'm not careful, if I don't have emotional intelligence and professional maturity, I may react to that immediately when that isn't what you're trying to say at all.
Sure.
And then the conversation kind of spirals.
Yeah, absolutely. You can usually tell when someone is listening to respond, because before you usually get the complete words out, they're giving you the rebuttal, they're giving you what you think you should be believing or whatever it is, versus somebody who truly is listening, truly is understanding, and you can tell that in the difference in the conversation normally.
And so when we have a conversation with someone, it is important that it's an active listening process, not just a word process. And there are people who listen silently, and there are those who listen loudly. Unfortunately, the different styles, people figure out how to make them work. But I feel like if I'm listening loudly, which means you're talking and then I'm talking, then I'm not actually listening. I'm just talking. And we could be on two separate topics. And because neither one of us is actually listening, we don't even realize.
You get to the end and you move on.
Right? But so much of communication, we talked last time, a majority of our communication, 80% roughly, is nonverbal. And so if 80% is nonverbal and we're not listening and we're not paying attention, and that means we're not picking up the verbal portion of it, so we're losing some of those cues, and we're not listening, and we're just not getting to a place we need to be. So if you want more specifics about what we're talking about in active listening, it's in the review this week. I think it's an important topic for you to read on, but if it's not something you're interested in, if you say, look, I know that, I don't need to be told, great, jump to the next section, because the next section, I think, is... the topic triggered me when we talked about it over the weekend. And the scenario is a fire department somewhere had an African-American firefighter who was on scene treating a patient. The patient was belligerent and using racially charged language. And we see that.
Absolutely.
On scenes. I mean, when we respond to someone, they're not in their right mind generally or on their best day.
Yeah, no doubt. And sometimes they are in their right mind, but obviously we're there to treat them and do the best to help them.
Right. But even if they're in their right mind, if they're not, if they're on drugs or they're intoxicated, whatever, it doesn't excuse the language. And whether it's an African-American firefighter, a gay or lesbian firefighter, a female firefighter, it doesn't matter who it is, that language is inappropriate. But we can't always control it on the fire scene. And what we don't want to do is turn it into a shouting match.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we don't get anywhere.
Yeah, no. And like you say, a lot of times there could be intoxication. It could be a number of reasons why they are acting like they're acting. I remember one of the first calls I went to, and there was an elderly woman that had fallen, and she had hurt herself. We had strapped her to a backboard. She was intoxicated. And I remember she called me every name in the book with conviction. And that was my first experience with that, and it stuck with me just because it was all new. And she had no intention. She had hit her head. She was still intoxicated. She had no ill will, but if you would listen to the language, you would have thought otherwise.
Right.
And really, it was about not reacting, not really responding with a whole lot, than just being there to help and move on.
And, what we're saying sounds reasonable, I think, to everyone. But I think they may also take it where we're at in the conversation as, okay, well, we can't do anything, so I guess we just step back. Well, there's a couple things that you want to look at. One, as John said, you don't want to react. There's a video out there, because remember, everywhere you are today on a call, you're on video.
Oh, yeah.
And there were some firefighters and police officers and paramedics who were around a patient who was being belligerent, and then either one of the firefighters or medics walks up and kicks the patient in the head. That is not what we expect you to do. No. That would be the opposite of anything that we would advocate for. You have to maintain your professionalism. However, there is a point where someone on the crew should say, listen, sir or ma'am, that language is not appropriate. I need to ask you to stop so that we can treat you.
Yes, and I agree. And the expectation at this point is that someone, if no one else, is that company officer or the leading officer on that call, should be the one stepping up and, if nothing else, addressing the language, addressing the issue. That way everybody else on the crew can see that as well. Because no different from what you mentioned, the worst thing they can do is say nothing and then follow up and do nothing.
Right.
We can't control it. And what you may be able to absorb as a company officer or anybody else, somebody else in the crew may not be able to absorb that. And I think that's where you see the reactions. There's a number of videos out there that include firefighters hitting and striking restrained patients because the person's belligerent, the person's going after them over and over and over, and they react. And it's the responsibility of that commanding officer at that point to step in, at least say something so that everybody else understands, yes, we see this is going on. It's not appropriate. We can't necessarily put a muzzle on the person.
Sure.
But we've addressed, at least at this point, an understanding that it's not appropriate.
Right. Well, and in this other fire department situation I was talking about, the individual who the language was targeted or who it was thrown at, the issue that individual had was the company officer never acknowledged it, never said, "Hey, are you okay?" What we would expect is for someone to say, "Hey, that language isn't appropriate," address it best you can on the scene, understanding we can't control all of it. But then after the fact, as you get on the engine, just as an officer, say to your crew, "Hey, that was inappropriate language. I can't believe those things were said. So-and-so, are you okay? Everybody okay with this?"
Yeah, it's no different than following up with a traumatic incident.
Right.
You don't know how everybody is going to respond to what happens on scene. And the expectation that the company officers are following up and have a good understanding of what their crew is feeling during that time.
Right. No, and the same thing goes in the fire station, because we have an obligation to protect our employees from harassing environments. On the incident scene, we're limited, but when we're in the fire station, we have more opportunity, more flexibility in that, because if it's an outside person or a vendor, we can ask them to vacate the premises.
Yeah.
And in the administrative offices, we can do the same thing. We can provide focus and clarity and ask you to vacate the premises if you can't keep it together. And then if they won't, we can call our friends in blue and say, "Can you please provide focus and clarity for this individual as you're escorting them from the scene?" But then the incident isn't over until we sit down with the person who was the target of the incident and say, "Hey, this was absolutely inappropriate. Here's what we've done to try to address it. Are you okay? Is there anything that you need right now?"
Yes, and the expectation of the organization is that when you are making that confrontation in return and working to, whether it's stifle it, remove the person, that you're doing it in a professional manner.
Right.
Because all too often you can try to use position or rank or whatever it is as a level of authority and a level of power, and sometimes you have none other than you can communicate with the person and call our friends in blue to come help remove them. But using aggression is not going to usually help if that's what they're bringing to the table as well. No. So it's finding a creative way to try to de-escalate the situation and move forward.
And for our folks, just a reminder, don't be the problem.
Yeah.
So the patient may say some things, but don't become the problem yourself by becoming too engaged in reacting to the situation. But I think the bottom line is, John, maintain emotional intelligence, exercise professional maturity, and take care of our folks.
Yes.
And acknowledge when something happens. So 2 articles this week, very basic. The first one is a guide to attracting talent, and government delivering better employee experiences is key. And I think that's something that we've talked about, we're working on. This article really delves into some of the, and this is Jonah's area, the website, the social media. How are we using technology to make life better for our folks? And we don't think of that often in the fire service, but even the military is starting to use that.
Yeah, good.
To attract people. It's amazing to me. I heard on Jocko's podcast once they were talking about some are starting to use some of the gaming as an attraction. You've got drones, you have all these things. There's not a lot of people with experience and background in special forces to recruit to special forces. They're basically out of high school.
Yeah. Yep.
Here's a gun, here's some stuff. Go deal with this. So the second one is when the sun goes down, nighttime fireground operations and training. It's just a good reminder for our folks that we have to train the way we play, and calls don't always come in at the opportune time of day. It's that time of year where it's dark, like 5 o'clock, which is killing me.
Well, it's nice to get your ISO required night drill. It makes it a lot easier when it's dark by 5.
Right. Yeah, it absolutely is. So just a reminder and some background and information on why we train at night, especially as we move into quarterly training. And hopefully we'll get that back up and running into a few challenges right now, but overall pretty good. So, John, anything else to add this week?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. All right. Well, once again, thank you for tuning in to the CAFMA Connect. Until next week, don't react, respond to people. Thank you.